seating for their prayer and the acknowledgement to country. We ask for all guidance and blessing on this council. May the true needs and well-being of our communities be our concern. Help us, who serve as leaders, to remember that all our decisions are made in the best interests of the people, culture and environment of the Corangamite Shire. Amen. Acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders past and present. Mr Nason, do we have any apologies?
Mr Mayor, we've got no apologies for tonight's meeting.
Thanks. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest?
Mr Mayor, I've got two declarations of conflict of interest, one from Councillor Brown in relation to item 9.11, which is the lease agreement in Derrinallum, and one from Councillor Beard in relation to item 9.16, which is the quick response grants.
Thank you. Councillors, can I have someone confirm the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you. Councillor Gustain, seconder. Councillor Brown. No comment. All those in favour? Carried. Now, tonight we have a number of deputations and presentations. I'll read through the list. Before we start, we'll ask you to limit your conversation to 5 minutes. If you look like exceeding that, we'll give you a warning at 4 minutes so that you have time to finish up. Tonight we have, in relation to agenda item 8.1, planning permit application process, Mr Peter Furlong, Brent Hornby and Daniel Samways from Grand Court, Chris Gibson and Anthony Mulcahy and Chris Coots. In relation to that item, we also have a written deputation from Mr Daniel Bingham that has been circulated amongst councillors. And on agenda item 9.14, Terang Battery Energy Storage Facility, we have a submission from in writing from Gillian Holloway. Howley, sorry, from Gillian Howley. So we'll kick off with Mr Furlong, thank you, if you'd like to come up to the microphone.
Is this where you want me here?
Yes, you can start. Yeah.
I've come here today. You might not hear this ever again, but I'd like to thank Grand Court for moving their entranceway onto the Hamilton Highway. It's going to save us a hell of a lot of grief. But the issue I'm bringing up at the moment is they've made a statement to say that the closest tower to us is Lismore. Well, I've checked on the web and I've used a site called RFNSA. I don't know what it actually stands for, but at the home page, you type in your address and it can actually give you pictures of the sites, or it actually tells you the closest. I've got Tower 332202. It's on Lower Cressy Beac Road in Cressy. It's 12 kilometres from my house. Tower 332202. It's another tower in Cressy on the Lower Cressy Beac Road, and it's 12.06 kilometres from my house. The next one that's closest is Tower 33600002. It's on 274 Willow Avenue Road, Woollen Vale, and that's 12.78 kilometres from my house. One more is Tower 33600003. That's on 29 Brayshawds Road, Woollen Vale. Then we go to Lismore. Lismore, 131 High Street, Lismore, 14 kilometres. Tower 33240003, 140 Lismore, Skipton Road, Lismore, 15.33 kilometres. What I'm saying is a smartphone today doesn't pick a tower, it picks the closest. Now, I've got issues because we've got the wind farm coming up there. I'm down to one cell at the moment. If I want to go and watch something for 2 minutes, it buffers, it can go out to 10 minutes. So with the wind farm coming in, what I've got when the bunkers are full, I have an issue with my signal goes to nothing, very little. I'm trying to help these guys out because they don't see it that way, but the reality is with the wind farm coming up, instead of them having to pay the whole lot, I think the wind farm's going to have to pay, and they're going to have to pay to get the service back to a reasonable. I'm only just bringing it to your attention. I can give you the website. I'm not that smart to send you all the websites on phones. I don't understand it, the web like you guys do, but I can give you the actual website if you want to check up on it. I haven't made this up, and they're facts actually off the web. So that's, and to use their words, the closest tower they used. So they know that the tower, the phones pick up the closest tower. So they're facts that I want to bring up to your attention. I have a serious issue with speed limits in the township of Berrybank. Paul Maguire's not very well at all. He probably won't be here by the Christmas time, but it's a case of, he doesn't get much sleep at all, but it's a case of, I think these trucks, we're going to have an issue. I've spoken to the young fellow over here, and hopefully we can sit down and have a talk outside of this, but I'd like the council to give us some ammo to fire back at them, because in the past I've had issues where trucks have come from the Hamilton Highway, and I've got photos at home where I reckon there was at least 80 tyre treads burnt into the asphalt. That's how hard they were coming down. So I'd like the council to make sure that that's sort of, there's some ammo that we can throw back at them to at least keep their trucks in line, if that makes sense. The trees, we've had them have a semi-trailer with a front end loader taking trees, and they basically said that it was dead trees that was down on the ground. I got photos, and they were all live trees they cut down. We don't want no trees cut down because of the dust that comes off the site. And after that, I'll have my piece, and I'd just like to bring those points up and hope that you can actually take them in consideration when you pass the permit.
Thanks, Mr. Furlong. We now have Brett Hornby and Daniel Samwise. Thank
you. Dear councillors, thanks for having me. My name is Brent Hornby. I'm the Regional Operations Manager for Victoria. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to this General Council meeting in support of our planning permit application for expansion of Berrybank grain facility located at 3580 Foxhow-Berrybank Road, Berrybank. The current site provides grain bunker storage for the local farming community. The site services over 60 grain growers in the local area and provides them access to international export and domestic markets. In addition to this, site employs numerous people over the harvest period and throughout the year. This planning permit application is seeking approval for construction of new bunker pads, drainage works and internal service tracks to expand our grain bunker storage facilities at Berrybank. Construction of a new entrance off the and also a construction of a new entrance off the Hamilton Highway, and the relocation of site infrastructure to the east, further away from neighbouring houses, including construction of 2 new weighbridges and offices, a new sample stand and a storage shed. GrainCorp is aware of its environmental responsibilities, and this development is significantly focused on improving environmental outcomes. The Berrybank development will provide the following environmental benefits. Relocating the site entrance to the Hamilton Highway will significantly reduce the number of trucks passing through the Berrybank Township on Foxhow-Berrybank Road. 93% overall truck traffic to and from the site will be removed from Foxhow-Berrybank Road. Relocating the sample stand and weighbridges further to the east moves truck traffic away from residents. Separation distance to the nearest truck roadway bunker are increased to greater than 250 metres, and separation distance to new weighbridges and sample stands are increased to greater than 600 metres. These changes minimise potential for noise and dust complaints. This is a significant development for the local growers of Corangamite Shire. GrainCorp operates an open network and is responsible for monetising our growers' grain and improving our supply chain to increase net returns for the farmer. GrainCorp is committed to supporting regional communities, and more money in growers' pockets is good for the sustainability of local communities. This development will increase prosperity in Corangamite Shire by provide new sale opportunities and reduced transport costs for local growers. Additional bunkers will enable the site to accept a larger variety of grains, reducing requirement to transport grain to alternate storages further away. provide capability to receive additional commodities and grades of wheat and barley, allowing growers to maximise the value of their crop, provide faster turnaround times for local growers. Additional bunkers will enable the site to manage inloading more efficiently by improving traffic flow bottlenecks. This will result in shorter queue times, reducing grower harvest costs and exposure to weather events, and provide potential for permanent and casual employment positions to be created on site to keep employment within districts and surrounds. GrainCorp has made a commitment to invest in assets and infrastructure that supports regional economies such as Berrybank to ensure they are able to compete locally and internationally. GrainCorp is conscious and mindful of the need to invest in infrastructure that does not detrimentally impact on communities near operational sites. The net community benefit of Berrybank development is clearly demonstrable. Please refer to the letters of support included in our application and growers who have made it to the council meeting today in support of our development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daniel Samways or Chris Gibson?
Good evening. My name is Chris Gibson. I'll just introduce myself. I'm a local grower of grains, by farms within about 15-kilometre radius of the GrainCorp Berrybank silo complex. I'm also the secretary for the local Berrybank Grain Growers Committee. So I'm here representing not only myself but the grain growers that deliver grain and support the GrainCorp Berrybank site. I've been on that committee for greater than 7 years, and we've been advocating for development of the site for quite a long time. The reason being is that grain growing in this district of Lismore through to Cressy, Derrinallum, the area of grain has increased quite a lot over the last few years, and we simply don't have enough storage in the district, given that we've also had some other private storages build grain storage. But in years when we have excess, that excess usually ends up going on trucks to Geelong or wherever else we can find a home for it. So increasing this storage capacity would help us enormously. We don't have to have trucks on the road carting longer distances, and the area that's growing this grain now can significantly greater. So the need there for the expansion is critical. We also want to endorse the proposal to change the entrance and exit from the current location onto the Hamilton Highway. Logically, it's just a much better and safer entrance and exit to the facility. So, yeah, on behalf of myself as a grain grower, I'd like to endorse their proposal. It's been a long time to try and get this expansion and critical works done to safeguard the environment for the employees and all us farmers, truck drivers, and also to increase the capacity. So I'd like to thank you for the time and allow me to have a say. Thank you.
Anthony Mulcahy.
Thank you, Mayor Trotter, and thanks, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Anthony Mulcahy. I'm a grain grower from that grow crop out of Bite and Skipton, and I'm also a VFF Grains Councillor for the Southern Region that takes in the Berrybank area, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of VFF members. GrainCorp are presenting an exciting opportunity for grain growers and the Corangamite Shire. For many years now, I've been hassling the representatives from GrainCorp about the site at Berrybank at every grains industry gathering, and I'm sure they think, here we go again, here goes this bloke who wants to talk about Berrybank again. The Berrybank region has gone from farms with mostly stock, with the odd paddock of crop, to mostly crop with minimal stock, and in some cases no stock at all. Incidentally, this land use change has increased the production per hectare on a weight basis from less than 500 kilograms per hectare of wool and meat to about 4 tonnes per hectare of grain. And no doubt the Shire's roads are feeling the strain of this large increase. Many seasons in recent years, the Berrybank site has maxed out, that is, filled to capacity, resulting in growers travelling further to alternate sites. This increases the freight costs for farmers and wear and tear of the roads and vehicles, and decreases efficiency. In my case, farming at Footpath, it means that the increased cost of travelling 70 kilometres to Westmere, and for those of you who are not familiar with Westmere, it's on the Glenelg Highway between Lake Bolac and Streatham. And this is at an increased cost, but also I get a penalty in freight differential to port of approximately $2 a tonne. And that is, I'm carting it further away from the port and then paying more to get it back to the port for export. This season I had a contract with GrainCorp delivered to Berrybank, but unfortunately Berrybank filled before I was able to fulfil my contract with GrainCorp, and thankfully they were reasonable and allowed me to deliver to the rest of the contract that was supposed to be delivered to Berrybank to Westmere, but that was at an increased cost to me and a discount price at Westmere. And many growers have stories similar of inconvenience, increased cost, and just increased cost and inconvenience. So Berrybank has been a frustration for growers for many years now. With the change in land use in the northern part of the Shire over the past 20 years, the grain production has grown significantly. Crop management in the high rainfall zones has improved, resulting in better yields, harvesting and faster harvesting equipment has resulted in the need for a more efficient grain receival facility to take the volume of grain produced in a timely manner to keep harvesters moving. What farmers need is a receival centre that serves the needs of growers, and that's what this proposal does. Grain growers of the region need this expansion at Berrybank. GrainCorp...
Got a minute, Mr. Mulcahy.
I'll be only a few seconds. GrainCorp has recognised Berrybank as a reliable production region and therefore backing this with significant investment they plan for the site. The plan proposed is well thought out and addresses many of the historical issues with the site: increased capacity, improved access with a new entry, improved site layout with flow and new sample stand, and a new marshalling area for trucks. It will reduce the distance travelled by heavy vehicles delivering grain, increase local employment and reduce the costs for growers delivering grain. I urge councillors of the Corangamite Shire to support this proposal put forward by GrainCorp and deliver grain growers in the north of the Shire a desperately needed site that meets their needs for now and into the future. Thanks for the opportunity.
Chris Coots. Right. No. Good, thank you. That ends our spoken deputations. We have no committee reports. I'll move on to planning reports. Item 8.1, planning application PP 2020-036, use and development of land for a rural store, expansion of grain storage and handling facility, and creation of access to a road zone, Category 1, Hamilton Highway 3580, Foxhow-Berrybank Road, Berrybank. Mr. Moyne, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I present Council with this report planning permit application PP 2020-036. The application seeks planning approval for the use and development of land for a rural store involving the expansion and upgrade of existing grain storage and handling undertaken on site, including new site access from Hamilton Highway. 5 new grain storage bunkers are proposed to provide additional on-site storage capacity and capability to receive additional grades of wheat and barley, whilst enabling inloading during harvest and outloading to occur more efficiently. Notice the application was given and Council has received 6 submissions, 3 objections and 3 submissions in support of the proposal. Key issues raised include site access and traffic impacts, closure of existing Foxhow-Berrybank Road access, landscaping and visual amenity, stormwater and drainage management, hours of operation, vermin management, phone, internet and television reception. Submissions in support of the proposal refer to increase in cropping and grain production within Corangamite Shire, reduced distance travelled to transport grain, reduced transport costs for growers, increased local employment opportunities. The application was referred to Department of Transport who support creation of the new access from the Hamilton Highway. The proposal has been assessed against the relevant provisions of the Corangamite planning scheme and will provide an acceptable planning outcome. Planning policy direction supports further expansion and upgrade of the site with new access from Hamilton Highway away from adjoining and existing residential properties. The proposal will facilitate a significant upgrade and investment in the site to support the local grain and cropping sector and creating further options to direct local product to domestic and international markets. Issues raised within submissions have been reviewed and do not raise any matters that would lead to an unacceptable planning outcome. Councillors, the recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Mr. Moyne. Councillors, the recommendation is before you. Do we have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Brown, do we have a seconder? Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Spot funding, mobile phone funding through the federal government, so rest assured that we will certainly look at that on your behalf. And also, speaking to Mrs Maguire when I was on the site, she raised the issues around speed limits and also signage on about exhaust brakes from trucks. And obviously the truck traffic is going to significantly decrease. As we heard earlier, 93% less trucks on the road, so that should be a better outcome, but that's something else that we can look at as the council. And with regards to the trees, I agree we don't need to cut down any more trees if that can be helped, but there is a tree landscaping condition in the permit which should address some of your concerns. So thank you, Mr Furlong and the other submitters for making a contribution, and I support this Councillor Brown's motion.
Thanks, Councillor Restraint. Councillor Meahy.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, I completely agree with previous councillor's words, and it's like anything, infrastructure needs to grow with the industry, and up until now that hasn't been able to occur. And obviously our people have provided their deputations tonight have, explained how that's only going to continue to increase over time. So it's rightfully so that this is quite, the timing is right to actually get this infrastructure that's required in place. For many years since I've been on council, obviously that site at Berrybank has thrown various issues over the years. And obviously some of the particular items that were raised when we had our on-site meeting with the submitters and the applicants, various concerns were raised, and I'm pleased to see that they have been addressed in the conditions. Particularly for me was the control around dust. Obviously moving the entrance way onto Hamilton Highway is significantly going to deal with that, so that's good to know. And obviously another one was vermin management, which is in any type of facility like this is quite paramount. There's conditions around that. So to Mr Mulcahy and Mr Gibson, I guess the crusade that you've had now for a few years has paid off. potentially, and I guess it always comes down to advocacy and hoping that you're representing your people in the way that they deserve, and that's the grain growers in your region, and I think you've done that. So thank you to those that have continued on that crusade. So I wholeheartedly support this application.
Thanks, councillors. Any further comment? No, I think I'm supporting the application. This application is pretty indicative of the changing nature of agriculture in the northern part of our shire. The throughput of this facility is going to be more than double. This will take most of the trucks off the Berrybank Foxhow Road, improve the amenity for those residents located in Berrybank. It should also improve road safety at the Hamilton Highway Berrybank road intersection, and the site will eliminate queuing for trucks entering the site, and throughput for the facility will be enhanced as a result. Turnout lanes will be constructed on the Hamilton Highway to improve safety for vehicles entering the facility and leaving the facility. And as has already been previously stated, there's a number of conditions attached to the permit that will improve the amenity for the nearby residents. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to item 9.1, budget 2020-2021. Mr Taylor, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. This report seeks to adopt the 2020-21 budget, including fees and charges scheduled in accordance with the Local Government Act. Council resolved in May to place the draft budget on public display and invite submissions to the budget. Council received 6 submissions, which all have been summarised in this report. During the display period, Council also received additional information which has now been reflected in the updated budget recommended for adoption. These changes include commitment of $4.5 million of funding for the 12 Apostles Trail, and as a result of this, the project, which was previously spread over 2 years, has been brought forward to the 2020-21 budget. Council was also successful in receiving $2.28 million in funding for road and community infrastructure projects. The details on this funding and how this will be allocated are not yet resolved, and as a result, a placeholder has been recognised in the budget. Council also received advice that the financial grants estimate provided in the budget was incorrect, it's been updated, and has forecast the updated amount in the budget, allowing for a 1% buffer. Investment earnings have also been reduced by $100,000 as a result of falling investment rates. In summary, the budget contains $55.7 million in commitments and $20.2 million in capital projects, and includes an operating surplus of $5.28 million. The budget has been based on a 0% increase to rates and includes a $2.5 million COVID-19 economic stimulus package. The budget maintains Council's sound financial position and a strong commitment to high standards of service. Councillors, the recommendation is before you.
Thank you, Mr Taylor, for your summary of the budget. It's certainly been, as I said when we we put the draft budget out for public comment, there's certainly unprecedented times in the way that the budget was turned around with removal of, the allocation of $2.5 million for the COVID-19 stimulus package. Budget was basically rewritten within a month. This is certainly the largest budget that I've ever had to move at $55 million. And it's also pleasing that under these circumstances that there is no rate rise, but there will be implications on our long-term financial planning as a result of this. But in saying to people that while there's no rate rise, you may still see a change in your rate bill. And this is because valuations are now carried out annually, and so the valuation on your property may have changed. So that'll result in whether your rates might stay the same, they might increase, they might decrease. But it's the valuation that's shifting that, not the rate rise, because there isn't one. Also on your rate notices, there's also the fire services levy, which is a charge that the state government put on our rate notices. That money is 100% returned to state government. Also the landfill levy that's collected by all the at the landfill is going to significantly increase on the 1st of January 2021. This is as a result of the recycling and waste initiatives by the state government. And again, that's a charge that's imposed by the state government that we return to them. Hopefully they'll return it to us in the form of grants. So I mentioned there's a $2.5 million stimulus package, which, as a lot of you would have seen, has already started rolling out across businesses particularly that were impacted by COVID-19 closures, and those grants have been advertised and some have closed. Council are also seeking, or that's also closed, is job applications for 47 positions as part of that stimulus package. Funding has been flowing through the state government, and we were very excited to receive $4.5 million to go towards the 12 Apostles Trail with the long council substantial dollars that'll see that long-awaited project get started and hopefully finished within the next 12 months. There's also $2.2 million through the federal government, the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Fund, and as Mr Taylor mentioned, those funds have not yet been allocated. Again, this council has been able to operate in the most responsible manner, and we still have no borrowings, which is a mighty effort by our staff and our council in retaining that. And the same being responsible, we do set aside funds for our reserves, and as we've seen the Defined Benefit Superannuation Fund, there's significant money set aside in the future if there is a call on that. Landfill rehabilitation, again there's money set aside, and also major projects. So all our money really is earmarked, that we don't have any dollars stashed away for a rainy day. A $20 million capital works program is quite significant, with $9.2 million for roads, drainage and bridges. And as we'll see later tonight in discussing the community satisfaction survey, that's where our community want to see our money being spent. So we're listening, and that's what's happening. As well as $6.27 million in recreation and community facilities. So Council has significant asset management plans that we're very proud of, and this ensures that our funds are being put into the areas that most need them. So I'd like to thank people who've taken the time to make submissions to the budget. They've certainly been well considered. And again, I'd like to thank Mr Ray, Director of Corporate Services, Mr Taylor and their staff for the work that they've done in putting the budget together, but indeed all council staff who've had input into this document, as well as I mentioned earlier at our draft budget discussion, the way this was discussed at council in such a collegiate, respectful way certainly makes life a little bit easier. So thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the budget.
Councillor Strain. Councillor Miller.
Yes, the budgets are difficult, particularly this one with the current circumstances. Budgets are really a juggle between roads, business, environment. You know, it's like being asked which child you love the most. You love them all, and you could probably spend the budget on each of them. Obviously, you can't do that. One of the questions that I've been asked time and time again is, why doesn't council borrow millions and stimulate the economy more right now? It's fair to say that that is something that council has asked itself. This council indeed paid a debt back 4 years ago, and that was a good decision at the right time. When the COVID-19 hit, financially, we were probably one of the best prepared councils, certainly in this state. We had to then swing into a crisis mode, if you like, almost completely upheave the budget. I would say now that stopping rates, indeed heavily reducing them or even reducing them by a small amount, is not an option. Under the current rules, if council did that, it would be impossible to correct. That decision would compound year upon year until council couldn't operate. Council don't write the rules, we're governed by them. Corangamite Shire has not gone into debt yet, and that's a decision that we've made. We are not averse to debt. We have, however, spent over $5 million to keep our economy moving during the crisis, and that's a big sum, and it was well put in the previous speech. The hardest part for us was actually how to get the greatest economic hit from those funds. And ultimately, we asked ourselves also is, how do we turn $5 million of council money into $15 million or even $20 million worth of stimulus? And the answer to that was infrastructure projects and partnerships. We then went through the infrastructure projects and found one that was COVID safe. The Timboon Port Campbell Trail, for example, the state government partnership came into partnership with us, and ultimately right there we turned $3.5 million of your ratepayer money into $7 million of stimulus and jobs. That stimulus figure now, after the federal government's kicked in $2.2 million, is probably getting up close to $12 million. And I think that's something that we should be proud of. Not just the fact that we've spent 5, but we've turned it into 12. And indeed, the council hasn't borrowed yet. Why? Because if this recession continues beyond the current 18-month stimulus plans from the federal or state governments, then we are potentially looking at another downtime, a potential cliff, if you like, or a black hole for business. And this council is prepared to go again. Local government is the government that is closest to the people. It provides you, your children, the disabled, elderly, sports grounds, aged care, disabled ramps, childcare and health. Rest assured, we will borrow if we have to. And I suppose the other aspect too, and I'll finish on, is I do have ringing in my ears the statement, "Illo, please keep the rates as low as possible, brother." Well, I'm hearing this time and time again, and I have to say we are all battling. There's a lot of people battling at the moment, and council is listening, and we're also planning for you. This budget, I say, Dave and Adam, this is a masterpiece. You've done a terrific job, and Andrew and all the directors. I think that we've really done exceptionally well, but having said that, I have no doubt we'll have to adjust it. We don't know what's around the corner. So, thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Significant extra funding has been received since the draft budget was put out for public comment, and this will allow Council to complete the 12 Apostles Trail in the 2021 financial year. An extra $2.8 million from the federal government for local roads and infrastructure projects has been most welcome, as well as an estimated $355,000 in extra financial assistance grants. Even though $2.5 million has been set aside for the economic stimulus package and rate income will be less than initially budgeted, we are still proposing a capital works program of over $19 million that will include $9.2 million for our roads, drainage and bridges, and $6.2 million for recreation and community facilities. $317,000 in a range of community grant programs will be made available, as well as money for service improvements to our libraries, the implementation of a youth strategy, and $20,000 to continue to make our communities more accessible and inclusive. Council's strong economic position prior to the pandemic has allowed us to respond quickly and responsibly, while still maintaining a stable financial forecast so we can continue to meet our future obligations. This is a period of great economic volatility. Things can and will change quickly, and it is important that we make sure we have a budget surplus to bolster us against any potential risks. Thank you.
Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Ultimately, Council does have the final say on the decisions we make when we come to a council meeting, and ultimately one of the biggest decisions we ever make is when it comes to our budget. But through the leadership of our CEO, our directors and the entirety of the Corangamite Shire organisation, hats off to every single staff member that has managed to pull this year's budget off to where we are tonight to make the decision. Obviously, we had a great first draft budget, which I spoke at length about at when we released this particular draft budget to the community for feedback. And then obviously we had to completely redo that. But that wouldn't have happened without the commitment and the expertise of the staff. And I think often they get overlooked. Not once did we want to lose a service, which we haven't, but every single member pulled together, whether they had to remove projects that were identified to happen, or they've put them off for another year, or maybe even 5 years. It has enabled us to come here tonight to make a decision on this particular budget. And listening to Councillor Gustray and Councillor Illingworth and Councillor Durant, it's pretty darn good too, I must admit. We're obviously able to continue our funding that we put into our local roads projects and our maintenance, but our advocacy will not stop. We understand that to obtain not only state funding but also federal funding going forward is so unknown. So now more than ever have we had to be really responsible with our expenditure, but we also have to be prepared, as previous councillors have noted, is that we don't know what's ahead of us. Our communities don't know what's ahead of them, but please be assured that we are committed to every service that we have within our communities right now, and I think this budget reflects that. I actually appreciate too that this council was committed to the business as usual approach. So even though we're in the midst of a pandemic, and at the time when this draft budget was released, we didn't really know how things were going to pan out, we've been able to continue that business as usual approach, and I think this budget is a significant reflection of that. So I just not only recognise the work that councillors did in getting it to this stage, but more importantly the staff as well, because there has been a lot of sacrifice.
Councillors, any further comment? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. This budget continues to be balanced, progressive and supports several new initiatives in response to COVID-19, an increase of $2.5 million supporting the community and economic recovery. There are many projects, but one, a smaller one perhaps, but very important, is the capital works upgrade to the Lismore swimming pool of $125,000, in addition to the grant that we already have of $250,000 received from the Berrybank wind farm. It's a long-awaited project and will improve the facilities at the pool. This is a responsible budget and nil borrowings, a budget that can support our many projects in our communities and for our community members. I would like to congratulate our finance team on their excellent work and guidance, and I therefore support this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Brown. I'd just like to add, when we commenced compiling this budget, we had no indication of the events that were about to prevail. We had most of the budget well and truly formulated when the coronavirus hit, and I would like to thank the councillors and officers for their dedication, understanding and hard work in revising and amending the budget at such short notice and to meet the new set of circumstances. There are a number of projects that had to be cut from the estimates and budget and to enable this budget to be delivered. Council took the decision to forego a rate rise in this year's budget, knowing that this action will have a compounding effect on future budgets. Council took the decision to create a stimulus package to advocate strongly for available stimulus programs from the federal and state governments. Having a number of projects shovel-ready and fully costed meant that we were able to attract funding from the stimulus package into the economy of the Shire. We're extremely grateful for that support, both from the federal and state government levels. There has been some concern expressed at the level of resources that Council has at its disposal. That funding is not just it's not a piggy bank. It's there to meet future calls and demands for funding expenditure that we know will arise in the future. For example, the landfill maintenance and restoration, superannuation guarantee funds calls, capital projects yet to be completed, and for joint future projects that we are undertaking with neighbouring councils. Although it may show up in the balance sheet as cash reserve, that money is committed and is not a piggy bank that we can of uncommitted funding. Council has maintained and increased its expenditure on operating expenditure and capital expenditure. It is vital that we do not remove funding from maintain our capital assets. I believe we have created a responsible and responsive budget, and it will most probably need review and amendment as we progress through these uncharted waters. And I support the officer's recommendation. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We'll move on to item 9.2, Council Plan 2017-2021 review. Mr Mason, thank you.
Thank you, through Mr Mayor. So Council is obviously required to review its council plan once every year, and this includes the Strategic Resource Plan. No changes to the council plan are recommended this year, given that there have been no changes to the broad strategic direction of council, and the fact that a new council plan will be required to be developed following the general elections in later this year. An annual action plan is something that council chooses to do every year, and that really gives direction and guidance to particularly staff around how we are progressing implementing the council plan. Obviously, a key action contained in this year's annual action plan is the development of a COVID recovery plan, which will guide council's ongoing response to the COVID situation. Another major piece of work this year reflected in the annual action plan is ensuring that council is compliant with the requirements of the new Local Government Act. So the recommendation in three parts before you, councillors, before you.
Thanks, Mr Mason. Councillors, can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Durant, do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Given that there will be a new council in November who will be tasked with developing their own council plan by July 2021, and that this is the last year of our current 4-year plan, I don't really see any need to make any changes to our strategic direction, particularly now that the next 12 months will be taken up with implementing the annual action plan that now includes a strong focus on supporting our communities and local businesses through COVID-19 recovery. So I'm very pleased to move the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Durant. Councillor Beard.
Through you, Mr Mayor, nothing further to add.
Councillors, any further comment? We'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to item 9.3, the Community Satisfaction Survey 2020. Mr Mason, thank you.
Thank you, through Mr Mayor. The Community Satisfaction Survey is undertaken every year. The survey is based on feedback from 400 residents in the Shire who are called on phones. It's important to note that these results are pre-COVID, so the survey was conducted basically from January to March, and so it falls outside of what I would say is the primary COVID impacts. The 2020 results generally show a slight decrease across most areas that have been measured, but that's entirely consistent with some statewide trends that we're seeing. And it's noted that I think our results are probably back on sort of a long-term average, given that the 2019 results were particularly high and for that reason very pleasing, which was, and I think that we recognise that those results were probably lifted by council's good response to the St Patrick's Day fires. High-performing areas include elderly support, appearance of public areas, and emergency management, and our town planning results have improved. They're one of the service areas that have improved. So I'd like to I think that they're all service areas that are very important to our community, and certainly like to thank all of the staff involved in delivering these results. Sealed local roads continue to be rated poorly, but I think, as we've discussed on numerous times, I think that we get a lot of confusion between the poor condition of the arterial roads and our own local roads. Roadside unsealed roads continue to be an area of focus, and we are developing a maintenance grading strategy which we hope will improve our approach to unsealed road maintenance. Roadside slashing and weeds, despite significant additional expenditure in this area, it's down, I think, as a result probably of concern around fire risk. And again, we'll be doing some internal reviews to see how we can improve those areas. So finally, when compared to large rural shires average and the statewide results, Corangamite continues to outperform in this community satisfaction survey. And I think that's something that we should be proud of, but something that we should continue to work hard to maintain those good results. So the recommendation is, Mr Mayor, that Council publishes the results on its website.
Mr Mason. Councillors? Any comment? Councillor Beard? Seconder? Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Beard.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Look, not much to say to this really, but I mean, this is once again a reflection of the entirety of the organisation, and it's really pleasing to see that there's been some service areas that have really performed outstandingly in the past 12 months since the previous survey was done. And I think in light of having what Mr Mason has just mentioned about, you know, those outstanding numbers following southwest fires and the response from Corangamite Shire, I'd almost like to think, hopefully going forward next year, that our residents will see in our response to this, the COVID issue, that we perhaps will have some outstanding numbers again. But as Mr Mason stated, we're still outperforming large rural shires, and we shouldn't forget that. But as I said, it's pleasing to see some really important service areas that are getting the recognition they deserve. And I just think we should still be really proud of these numbers that are coming through, because it is a reflection of the entire organisation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, customer satisfaction with sealed roads, you know, is still a problem. There's no doubt about it, and it does upset people, including myself. This is particularly the case in the south of the Shire, Timboon, Port Campbell, roads going from Cobden to Simpson and so on. And it's something that we can't ignore, and we're not. I have spoken at length about roads maintenance in the south. I think firstly we have to recognise that a lot of the roads complained about are actually state roads, and the unfortunate reality is that we can't fix them. It'd be like paying to renovate your neighbour's house. That's not going to happen, but we can advocate, and maybe that's something that we can do and try better. It's obviously something that we all want. Nevertheless, it's fair to assume that, that many of the constituents that have talked about the sealed roads know who owns what, and indeed that's something that, that I'll talk about later. I think one of the things too, as far as, and this is probably looking into the future, and something that I know that people in the south are actually hurting at the moment with COVID-19, Port Campbell is the most affected town. Indeed, it's arguably the greatest tourist town in Australia. And so when you don't have tourists, you don't have money coming in. So certainly one of the things that, that I would be pushing for is that any further stimulus that comes in that is talking about roads or infrastructure, ultimately it should head down towards the coast to address some of the issues down there. I mean, it really comes down to, if you cut your leg, you don't bandage your arm. There's no point in actually spending a hell of a lot of money in the north or in Camperdown or whatever if the crisis is down on the coast. But that's potentially for another day. One of the things, and going back to the roads, is that I have spoken to Miss Love, and at length we've talked about addressing the road issues that come up, and we've talked about a few new ways to potentially tackle the maintenance issues in the south. In the south we have high rainfall, land instability and dust issues that quite clearly annoy everyone. I think it may well be time in the, to actually address issues where we seem to suffer sometimes from what in a policing context is called the Genevieve syndrome or bystander syndrome, where a person was assaulted in the street and there were 30 people watching and everyone thought everyone else had rung the police. And I think that we do suffer from that at times with our roads. And I think to address that issue, it may well be helpful for the problem roads to actually nominate someone, have a designated person that contacts the Shire before it gets bad, to let us know, can you run the grader over it before it gets ordinary and starts annoying everyone. That would be grateful, it would be helpful for us. And so that's one of the changes. And I think the key to these satisfaction surveys is not about saying, well, aren't we great or aren't we bad? I think it's about saying, well, what's the plan? What are we going to do better if it is bad? And so the one-size-fits-all method of road maintenance, quite clearly the south needs to be treated differently, and that's something that Council's working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillors. Any further comment? Yeah, I'd just like to add road maintenance and roadside weeds remain as the primary area concern for for our Shire residents. Despite additional resources being allocated consistently each year for the life of this council, these issues remain as a primary area of concern. We live in an area with relatively high rainfall. We are closely settled with over 2,000 kilometres of Shire roads. For the main part, these roads are heavily utilised. There's no really easy solution or a quick fix. What we need is probably cost-effective solutions, and additional state and federal funding from their roads budgets would help. I think we've done quite a bit of work around the productivity and high yield freight vehicles, etc. This area is increasingly being recognised as a food bowl and an energy bowl, and with large volumes of tourist traffic. Its economics importance to the state cannot be understated. The work we've done in doing supply chain work and emphasises the need for increased funding for our road network. We have recognised the need for increased funding. We now need the state and federal governments to increase their contribution. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to 9.4, universal access ramps on footpath policy. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this report recommends Council adopt the universal access ramps on footpaths policy. Council requires building owners intending to install a ramp, access ramp, to make every effort to design the ramp within the property boundaries or the building itself. However, where this isn't feasibly able to occur and the access ramp will need to encroach on to Council's footpaths, this policy provides guidance to the building owners and Council. There are no changes to the policy detail. There is the name of the policy has been amended. The recommendation is before you.
Ms Love, councillors, have the recommendation. Someone move the recommendation. Councillor Durant, do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard, I think I saw first. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The only change to this policy since the last time it was adopted in 2017 is the change in wording from disabled access ramp to universal access ramp. Universal access meaning that everyone can get in and out of a building and not just those with a disability. Putting a ramp out onto a footpath needs to be done very thoughtfully and carefully so that the ramp itself doesn't become a hazard. I do note that no ramps have been installed on footpaths in the past 3 years, but we do need this policy so we have some form of direction should this be needed in the future. I'm happy to move the motion. Thank you.
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Any further comment, councillors? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Move on to 9.5, heavy vehicle access policy. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this report recommends Council adopt the revised heavy vehicle access policy, which sets out the processes for assessing applications for access and or load limit increases to the local road network. Requests for Council's consent for use of higher productivity freight vehicles and higher mass limit vehicles generally come through from the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator for approval by Council. The heavy vehicle access policy details the process and the steps that Council will take in consideration of the assessment of the local road network and to the criteria for alternate vehicles and increased loads. A proposed recommended change to the policy is that approval to an increase in higher mass limit across the network or specific local roads be delegated to officers in Council's asset planning team following a comprehensive assessment as detailed in the policy. This will enable the approval process for industry to be expedited once the assessment of the application has been undertaken by Council officers. The recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Ms Love. Councillors, have the recommendation before you. Have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Restrain. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brown. Councillor Restrain.
I have nothing to add to what Ms Love has very succinctly explained the changes in this policy, and I'm happy to support them.
Councillor Brown.
And the same as Councillor Christine.
Councillor,
Procedural, I think.
Further comment? Oh, yeah, this also relates to what we're talking about before in the satisfaction survey, and like we've had approaches from farmers' bodies to increase the capacity of our roads for specifically in grain trucks in the north, and probably increased milk tanker usage in the south. We are under pressure to build roads that meet the increasing productivity demands of our farmers and businesses. We need an increase in grant funding to do so. It's an expensive operation to upgrade your roads, bridges and culverts on strategic roads. We probably can't do it on every road, but we can do it on strategic roads and increase the productivity of the area. So without any further ado, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 9.6, school bus shelters policy. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. This report recommends Council approve the reviewed school bus shelters policy. This policy aims or confirms the process for the proposed establishment and ongoing maintenance of school bus shelters. The school bus network is administered by Public Transport Victoria, and as a result, since 2017, Council has not facilitated requests and there have not been budget allocations for the establishment of new school bus shelters. However, from time to time, Council receives requests from residents for the relocation of an existing and underutilised shelter, which has previously been installed by Council, and the request to a new site for school bus pickup. So this policy deals with the process for addressing those requests. The recommendation is before you.
Thank you, Ms Love. Councillors, have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Illingworth, do we have a second? Councillor Christine. Councillor Illingworth.
I've got nothing further to add.
Councillor Christine.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just for clarification's sake, I think is the explanation why Council doesn't have a budget allocation for school bus shelters, and it was a decision this Council made, and it came around about cost shifting from state government, that really the PTV education is a state government issue, and that they should be responsible for providing bus shelters. But in saying that, if there are parents that want to provide a shelter on Council Road Reserve, they can do so, providing they come in, they talk to us, they follow all the rules and regulations around putting a structure on the road reserve, or as Ms Love mentioned, occasionally there are requests for unused bus shelters to be relocated. So I'm happy for the policy to stay in place, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Restrain. Councillors, any further comment? I put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to item 9.7, Retail Area Facade Improvement Program Policy Review. Mr Bond, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. The report tonight provides Council with a revised Retail Area Facade Improvement Program policy. The Retail Area Facade Improvement Program has been a great success, with over 100 businesses being funded in the 5 years of its operation. It has been budgeted in the 2020-2021 budget with another $50,000. The key change with the policy that's been revised is it moves this funding program into alignment with our economic stimulus package, moving from a dollar for dollar contribution to $1 from the applicant to $2 for council, which hopefully will support those businesses that want to continue to improve their retail area facades. The program is innovative. It has seen over $750,000 worth of works completed across the Shire, mostly with local tradesmen, and really works towards supporting our community to update our retail areas and make them presentable, and also brings them into modern and aligns with our streetscape programs. Councillors, the recommendation is before you.
Mr Bond. Councillors, can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Brown, do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard. Councillor Brown.
Okay, through you, Mr Mayor. I certainly want to support this program. We have seen terrific improvements to the facades of many buildings throughout our towns, improving the amenity and value in our communities. $750,000 being spent on these improvements, with the majority of the work completed by local tradespeople. An allocation of $50,000 for a fifth round will continue to provide economic stimulus and the opportunity to improve the look of our towns. So therefore I support this recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Brown. Councillor Bibb.
Oh, yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. And over the years that this program's been running, I've been quite vocal about the support that I have for this and how much of a difference it's made in many of our towns. I guess my comments are more around to people within the community and knowing that not all buildings within our shire are owned by local residents, and so therefore we sometimes have empty shops that are beautiful buildings sitting there, and unfortunately they're wasting away. But I guess there's an opportunity for people, particularly in the community, to empower people to do up those shop fronts, do something to attract new businesses. And now it seems like the perfect time that it's partnering up with the COVID economic stimulus. That's a great way to you know, hopefully revitalise some of these community centres or these retail centres. So it's more of a bit of a call to arms to our communities to just keep spreading the word about the opportunity that this program gives retailers. And look, I can't say enough, it's always been a really well and highly regarded program. So yeah, very supportive.
Councillors, any further comment? Put the motion.
Mr Mayor, can I just make just one quick comment? This is a fantastic grant scheme that we have for the retail facade scheme. And Councillor Illingworth mentioned earlier about Port Campbell. Well, there's been very few businesses in Port Campbell who have taken up the opportunity to apply. So I would certainly encourage them and businesses right across the council area to look out for when this is advertised through social media, your press, and make sure you get your applications in.
Councillors, any further comment? Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We move on to 9.8, Domestic Wastewater System Contribution Program Policy. Mr Bond, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. The report provides a revised domestic wastewater system contribution policy. This program is another grants program which provides a financial incentive for new housing in the Shire in lots that are contained in townships where there is no reticulated wastewater systems. These towns include Darlington, Derrinallum, Lismore and Noorat. The program was developed in response to feedback that it was difficult to develop and quite costly to achieve systems that meet EPA requirements in these small towns. The program is unique and, as we understand it, not developed or implemented by any other council across Victoria, which makes it a great opportunity for us to support people to build in these locations. There is no proposed changes within the policy. Councillors, the recommendations before you.
Thanks, Mr Bond. Councillors? Someone move the motion. Councillor Durant, do we have a seconder? Councillor Brown. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, Mayor. In certain towns where reticulated sewage systems are not available and wastewater treatment is required, the cost of development can be prohibitive, and it can also be a barrier to people who want to move to these towns and to build. The guidelines limiting the land value to under $120,000 should ensure that grants will go to applicants who genuinely will benefit from the contribution, and applicants must also be using the home as their primary residence and not renting it out or using it as a holiday home. Although only one of the 5 applications for this grant was successful, it does continue to be an innovative program and will hopefully attract more eligible applicants in the future.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Councillors, any further comment? Yeah, this has been, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more people take this up. I think perhaps with COVID virus being rampant in the cities, that there may be an opportunity for people to look at taking up some cheap land in some of our smaller townships and utilising this program. So there's funding there available to offset the cost of providing wastewater treatment in these smaller townships, and I would urge people that are looking to perhaps resettle or rebuild in some of these smaller towns to have a look at the the grant and take it up if possible. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. 9.9, Swimming Pool Season Review, 2019-2020. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this report provides information on the operations of Council's swimming pools for the 2019-2020 season. The season commenced in late November and concluded in mid-March 2020, which is surprising that it's only 3 months ago. It feels like years ago. There were a total of 34,249 attendances across the pools, which represented a 26% decrease on the previous year, with the decline evident in January through to March. This level of decrease was experienced across the region, with benchmarking with Shire and Ballarat City Council experiencing similar declines. An assessment of attendances and weather conditions highlighted that February was 2.9 degrees cooler than last year, and there were 5,000 less patrons this year than there were last year. There was also a change to the inclement weather policy, which meant the pools would not open if the temperature was less than 19.5 degrees. This was managed by council staff and YMCA, where lost hours were offset by opening longer on warmer days and additional programming later in the season. A range of programs were offered at the pools, which each encouraged participation and highlighted the support provided by our committees of management of each of the pools. A number of facility improvements and maintenance were completed pre- and post-season, as well as both Camperdown and Cobden pools being painted. Surveys were conducted at all the pools. Feedback was sought on the pool experience and how it made patrons feel, the cleanliness of the facility, the YMCA staff, kiosk options and any other feedback. In total, 571 people were surveyed across the 6 pools, highlighting that patrons appreciated the friendly staff, cleanliness of facilities and good swimming pool conditions and facilities, but there was room for improvement in the kiosk and the food offering available at each of the kiosks. The existing contract concludes in June 2021 with no further options available. So in preparation for a new contract to begin in July 2021, council officers will review the terms and conditions of the contract and bring that back to council in due course. The recommendation, councillors, is for this report to be received. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Lowe. Councillors, recommendations report. Someone move. Councillor Brown. Second, Councillor Beard. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Our swimming pools continue to provide our communities with excellent facilities to enjoy outdoor exercise, opportunities to socialise and learn new skills. Although attendances are reduced this season from 46,206 to 34,249, this is still a considerable number of people using our facilities and can be attributed to the cooler weather, as Ms Love has explained. Facilities continue to be improved: Timboon underground pipework, Cobden replacement of terracotta gutters and various other upgrades throughout. I congratulate the pool committees and the YWCA as they continue to provide some great activities such as pool discos, Christmas party with Santa, Australia Day long weekend events and Australia Day triathlon, and provide an excellent and collaborative service. At our recent Central Pool meeting, Chris Hibbert described the joy of 2 young participants in their triathlon on reaching the pool. They made it, and that is what our pools and activities are all about: the participation of our youth, challenging themselves and enjoying physical activities. I therefore support the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Beard.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I don't know, it's always disappointing to see it. It's one of these surveys that not the surveys, but I guess the reports that I wait on each year. I'm an avid user of their pools, and I've always been one to advocate for the continued use of our pools and obviously the budget that we put towards them. But to see the amount of per user getting up to close to $16 now as opposed to $11, you sort of start thinking about what else can we be doing, because at the end of the day, some of our kids in our communities, going to the pool is the best thing that can ever happen to them. They don't have the luxury of going away for January, going on school on, you know, family holidays, going to the beach. The pools are the be-all and end-all for some of our children, and obviously families in our communities too. So I want to continue to inspire each of our pool committees, and particularly YMCA, to evolve with the fact that our population, particularly I know in Cobden, if I speak on behalf of Cobden, is ageing, so we need to adapt some of our programming to not only being about suitable for younger kids, but, you know, for the likes of my age, and how else people like myself can get along and utilise the pool, as opposed to just going there and, you know, potentially just frolicking around in the water. But I think there is certainly still some scope to make our pools more attractable going forward. I was interested to hear that the kiosk is something that's been raised through the survey. I would certainly attest to that. I believe having 2 teenage boys at times, just an icy pole doesn't quite cut it. So I'm glad to see that YMCA will be investigating other ways to still keep the healthy options, but by having a kiosk that obviously can service the broader community. But we do need to be aware of the cost that, you know, facilities like this do cost our ratepayers ultimately. But as I said earlier, we do have our younger generation, which isn't like it used to be when we were growing up. The pool that's what you did. Whereas now there's so many other activities on hand for kids, and we seem to somehow need to evolve with that and somehow partner it with our pools, because they are a great, absolutely fantastic facility if we can get our people using them. Thank you.
Councillors, any further comment? I'd just like to add, probably it's going to be a bit concerning this summer if there's still COVID social distancing in place for some of our pools. So I think we could probably, if that remains in place, we may see a further fall off in the number of people who can attend, and that's probably concerning. But hopefully it's only for this year. But I think it's something we probably should take into account and prepare for. So, without any further ado, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 9.10. Cobden Civic Hall Committee of Management Fees and Charges. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. This report seeks council approval of the proposed fees and charges for use of the Cobden Civic Hall for the period 1 July 2020 to 30th of June 2021. The Cobden Civic Hall Committee has prepared and recommended an adjustment to the fees for the use of the facility. There is a slight increase in fees recommended to take effect as of 1 July. The recommendation is before you.
Councillors, recommendation is before you. Councillor Beard. Seconder. Councillor Restrain. Councillor Beard.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, and not too much to say to this other than we've got a really hard-working committee there at Cobden. They're obviously pouring their heart and soul into this facility of ours, the Civic Hall. It's very much a treasured asset to our community, and I know that they've put a power of work into keeping that facility up to scratch in terms of, you know, updating the stage lighting, the visual audio. I don't know if that's a correct term, Ms Love, but I'll go with it. You know, replacing tables and chairs. They're always trying to make that better, so then more people are encouraged then to want to use it. So we all know how important our community halls are to each of us, and I know firsthand how committed this committee are to making it the best that can be, and obviously that reflects in the minimal increases in those fees that are there. There's not much increase at all really when you look at it, but obviously they need to, you know, they incur costs, and so they need to be able to recoup some of that somehow. So encouraging as many user groups as possible I think is ideal, and obviously there's a really good fee chart to follow there that does capsulate all the different users. So I have no problem in supporting this motion or this recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. Councillor Restrain.
No, nothing further, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, any further comment? Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Next one, Councillor Brown. I think we have conflict of interest. 9.11. A lease agreement, 31 Main Street, Derrinallum. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, councillors. This report is to consider a lease agreement for the purpose of a coffee shop, community meeting space and a community garden at 31 Main Street, Derrinallum. The property was identified by council as a facility to investigate for the potential opportunity for sale or business opportunity as a part of the Shire's property utilisation review. In February this year, council advertised its intention to review the future use. 3 submissions were received during the process and 5 people attended an on-site meeting. One applicant provided 2 separate submissions, one for the purchase and one for the lease of the premises to operate an opportunity shop. The 3rd submission was for a coffee shop, community meeting space and the development of a community garden. The consultation process highlighted to us that the community were in favour of council retaining the facility for use by the community. In reviewing the options, provision of a lease agreement would allow council to achieve this whilst also generating a financial return. The recommendation before you, councillors, is to advertise the intention to enter into a 5-year lease agreement for use of 31 Main Street, Derrinallum, for the purpose of operating a coffee shop, community meeting space and development of a community garden.
Thanks, Ms Love. Councillors, the recommendation is before you. Councillor Durant, seconded Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, Mayor. Consultation has shown that people in Derrinallum are in favour of this facility being kept for community use, and a 5-year lease agreement with Mr Molesworth seems to be the best option for all concerned. A coffee shop, community meeting space and community garden will hopefully be of great value to the community and visitors alike, so I'm happy to move the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Durant. Councillor Illingworth.
Yes, I probably wouldn't have agreed with this if it was just a coffee shop. I think it's important that council stays out of the competitive nature of being a landlord-tenant arrangement with other landlords, private landlords. The fact is that this is a community meeting space as well, as Councillor Durant said, and also a community garden, so I'm more than happy to give it the tick.
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. Any further comment, councillors? Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried.
Thankfully we're sitting down. Might be sore by now.
We'll move on to item 9.12, contract 202-0007, provision of road maintenance products and services. Ms Love, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, councillors, this report is to award contract 2020-007 for the provision of road maintenance products and services. This contract will establish a panel of contractors for the provision of road maintenance products and services. It should be noted that during the tender process, crack sealing was excluded from the tender as council has had limited use for this service over the past 5 years, and any future use can be procured via quotation. As the tasks and services of the Shire are extensive and varied, the provision of a variety of products and services is critical to ensure cost-effective, high-quality delivery of projects to the designed scope and budget. Council received tenders from 10 suppliers. All tenders were evaluated against the tender criteria, and following the evaluation panel have recommended to award the contract to 4 suppliers. It is considered that this will provide council with the best variety and value for money and ensure that council staff can evaluate and select suppliers and materials to be utilised best suited to individual projects. The recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Ms Love. Councillors, can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Restrain, do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard. Councillor Restrain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and this is in line to how we've awarded this tender in the past. This time we've selected 4 of the 10 tenders that were submitted. I think it's important that, particularly as we've discussed our road network at length this evening, that our staff have the flexibility to pick and choose to make sure they get the right materials for the job. So happy to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Restrain. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, no, nothing further.
Councillors, anything further? Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Move on to item 9.13, contract 202-1003, supply and loading or supply and delivery of road making materials. Ms. Love, thank you.
Thank you. Last one. Through you, Mr Mayor, this report seeks council approval for the award of contract 2021-003 for the supply and loading or supply and delivery of road making materials. The Corangamite Shire road network consists of approximately 950 kilometres of unsealed roads and over 1,200 kilometres of, 915 of sealed roads and 1,220 kilometres of unsealed roads. An extensive construction and maintenance program for the road network is developed annually, and over the next 2 years our program is extensive. The supply of road making materials from external suppliers is critical in our delivery of that annual road program. 8 tenders have been received for this contract from suppliers who have all supplied road making materials to council in the past. All tender submissions were assessed against the evaluation criteria. Not all submissions met the specified Vic Roads classified material required for road construction. However, all tenderers have other materials available which will offer sufficient flexibility and variety for other smaller projects not requiring classified materials. This contract will again appoint a panel which will ensure that council can meet the scope and design requirements of road projects, and that there is sufficient variety of materials to complete all the projects in the annual road and construction program for the next 2 financial years. The existing contract for supply and loading of road making materials is due to expire on 30th of June, and this contract will replace the existing contract. The recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Ms. Love. Councillors, someone move the recommendation? Councillor Christine, seconder. Councillor Lingworth.
As I mentioned before, Mr Mayor, it's just important to have flexibility for the staff to make sure that they get the materials required, and there's certainly a wide range of materials available through these various suppliers and their quarries. Happy to move.
Thanks. Councillor Lingworth.
Yeah, nothing further, thanks.
Councillors, any further? Councillor Beard.
Yeah, just through you, Mr Mayor, just quickly, I'd just like to make mention that how lucky we are in our shire or municipality that we've actually got the ability to get some local quarries that get to service the work that we do. Obviously, the less cartage that we have to pay means the more work, the more material we actually get to put into the roads that we build. So we're very fortunate. Not all councils can say that they get to utilise their own local quarries. So that's great to see some local names on the tender list. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. Councillors, any further comment? I'd just like to add, it's probably also gratifying to see that the state government have said that they're going to make the approval of quarries, they're going to fast track them. I hope it just doesn't happen in the metropolitan areas. I think we'd like to see it probably happening into the regions as well. You can't build good roads without, or good buildings without quality material, and it was getting very, very difficult to source gravels and sands and road making materials, and I think this move by the state government is probably hopefully going to assist to overcome that. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We move on to item 9.14, Terang Battery Energy Storage System, Planning Process and Community Feedback Summary. Mr Moyne, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor, I'll present council with this report regarding the proposed Terang Battery Energy Storage System. Specifically, the report seeks council to determine which planning approvals process the proposal should go through, either ministerial intervention to provide a streamlined outcome or through council's normal planning process. A decision is not being made on the outcome of the project. AC Energy proposed to develop and install the Terang battery system at 70 Littles Lane, Terang, with up to 78 purpose-built shipping containers housing lithium ion phosphate batteries on approximately 1.4 hectares of land adjoining the Terang terminal station. Initial construction costs are in the vicinity of $100 million. Council has been approached by AC Energy to obtain its position on an alternative, streamlined and fast-track approval process involving ministerial intervention. Normally, Council would manage the planning approval for the proposal. The basis for ministerial intervention is primarily in response to the impacts of COVID-19 in seeking to bring forward construction and stimulate the local economy. Consultation was undertaken to obtain initial community feedback on the proposal. Consultation included an information stall held over 2 days in Terang, along with media and an online feedback form. A summary of consultation includes 48 submissions received, 31 in support of the project, 12 unsure or with queries, and 5 not in support. Support for the proposal largely centred around economic benefits, new investment, increase in electricity grid reliability and site location, including proposed landscaping. Concerns raised around not going through the council planning process, landscaping and visual amenity, environmental impacts, noise management, fire risk and health and safety issues. On balance, having regard to the consultation outcomes and the nature of the proposal, the alternative approval process using intervention by the Minister for Planning is seen as a beneficial mechanism to facilitate short-term investment and development for the project. Councillors, the recommendations before you.
Mr Moore, Councillor, we have the recommendation. Someone move. Councillor Durand.
I have an alternate motion, please.
Have an alternate motion.
Would you like me to read it?
Need a seconder?
We have to read it first.
I need to read it first.
I need to read it first, yeah.
My motion is as follows: that Council resolves not to provide support for intervention by the Minister for Planning and request that AC Energy submit a planning permit application to Council for assessment of the proposed Terang battery energy storage system.
Thanks, Councillor Durand. Councillor Strain.
Happy to second.
Seconded. Councillor Durand.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. As councillors, I believe we have an obligation to decide on planning applications that come to us. These decisions are often complex and difficult, but that is one of the reasons we are here and we have been elected to decide on these matters. The public also have the opportunity to have input into these applications and, most importantly, have the right to appeal to VCAT should they disagree with the decision made. By providing in-principle support for intervention by the Minister, I believe we are walking away from our responsibility to the community. I quote from this report: "Broader public notice and consultation, along with any rights for submissions and third-party review, would be limited through the process. The Minister, using these statutory provisions, waives the opportunity for public input into the approvals process." I don't believe that's right. The community has been given a very limited time frame to understand and comment on this proposal. The information that has been provided by AC Energy is fairly basic and does not go into any details about the issues raised, such as fire safety, environmental issues and noise, and the community benefits are not made clear. I am making no comments on the merits of this project, just the process that should be followed. I believe we need to go through the proper planning process, and if this results in a delay, then so be it. If we agree to send this to the Minister, we are basically giving it the green light. The public have had limited opportunity for feedback and have not been given any details on which to make an informed decision, and neither have we. Thank you.
Councillor Frank. Councillor Australia.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Durand. I think the consultation that happened in Terang last week was exceptionally confusing by the conversations that I've had with a number of people who attended. The question is, do you support the Terang battery energy storage systems, yes or no? And what we're really being asked about is whether or not you approve the process of sending this through to the Minister. I think that it's been mentioned to me that there was a lack of opportunity to view the various plans that have been, and management plans that have been provided by AC Energy, and it's very difficult to look at those plans not having the ability to take them away and to spend some time going over them before you can make your decision. But this is the decision we're making, is about whether or not to send this to the Minister. And I'd say that councillors have been elected to make these decisions, and therefore we should make them and not just pass them on. I think that we should be the ones that are setting the conditions if this permit goes ahead. And once again, I like Councillor Durant. I'm not saying which way I would go because I don't have the information yet to make that decision. We enforce and monitor the conditions if the Minister does approve a battery system, so I think that we should set the conditions in the first place, Mr Mayor. I also agree that, you know, removing the rights of residents to make submissions, and while it can be said that Councillor Bear presenting one voice on behalf of the community, I think it's important the community have that obligation, that opportunity as well, and also that they shouldn't be requested to waive their VCAT third-party rights. I'd like to hope that AC Energy put an application in soon, and we'll assess it under our standard processes, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Gastrain. Councillor Beer.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to the comprehensive comments by both Councillor Durant and Councillor Gastrain. For me, certainly, both have highlighted that as councillors we are elected to help and obviously make decisions on behalf of our community, but at the end of the day we are the responsible authority, and I don't think we have ever handballed any decision, well, never since my time on council, to have it made by someone else. So I've always stood by that fact that if it's our requirement to make the decision, that's what we do, that's what we're elected to do. I understand from the various phone calls I've had too that there was disappointment and lack of understanding of the project, and so as Councillor Gastrain alluded to, that question around do you support the project is a little bit open-ended. It actually didn't explain exactly what we were asking of them. And in fact, understanding now that management plans and impact assessments haven't quite been formalised yet, I find that quite hard to make a decision on that basis as well. And if we can't, then how can we expect our community members to do that? For various reasons, but particularly commercial in confidence, I understand that's part of what happens with companies like this and going through the process. But I think it's a big expectation for us to expect a community consultation period as short and as sharp as what it was, to really not take on board the depth of perhaps what people are actually wanting to know. So I think it would be irresponsible of us as a council to actually straight away give in principle support for this decision to be made directly by the Minister. So thank you, Councillor Durant, for your motion that you've proposed, and I fully support that.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. Councillors, any further comment? Councillor Illingworth.
Yes, I won't say much other than the fact that it looks weak if we hand this decision on, and I think that we've got the capacity to govern ourselves. I think that there has to be a pretty important reason for us to step beyond and take away the capacity for anyone to go to VCAT, which is what happens in these sort of scenarios. So, yeah, I'm happy to run with Councillor Durant's amendment, if you like, or motion.
Councillors, any further comment?
Exactly what I think as well, thank you.
Yeah, I'd have to say I was very conflicted by this application. This is a very significant investment and will assist to cement the Shire as an energy hub in the state. Renewable energy is becoming an increasingly important source of energy, and this facility will enable storage of power and increase the viability of renewable energy sources. However, I don't believe we should abrogate our responsibility as a planning authority. This is a project of state significance, and the Minister has the power and the option to call this in if he so desires. No matter what the decision we reach tonight, he can call it in. The community has demonstrated both support and opposition to the proposal, and in almost equal measure. Some of the ones that were in favour of it were also fairly strong in the opinion that this should come back to council for decision, even though they were supportive of the application. So they recognise that council should be the determining an authority on this. A common sentiment is that the time frame is too short, and council should be considering it as a planning issue. I agree. I think it should come before council as a planning application. The community have a right to make submissions and have them considered. I have a great regard for the due process and for the right of the community to have considered input. So I'm supporting Councillor Durant's amendment. All those in favour? Sorry, not amendment. Alternative motion.
It's just a motion.
Just a motion.
It's carried.
We'll get it right one day.
We'll move on to item 9.15, designation of a bushfire place of last resort, Camperdown. Mr. Bond, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Report tonight provides Council with a recommendation to designate a bushfire place of last resort in the township of Camperdown, which is along Manifold Street in the Avenue. The proposed Camperdown bushfire place of last resort was nominated to CFA as a potential site in May 2019, along with potential bushfire place of last resorts in the townships of Cobden, Terang and Noorat. At this point in time, this is the only site to be approved by CFA. Council officers await feedback on the remaining 3 sites that were also nominated over 12 months ago. As part of the assessment process, council officers have reviewed the sites in accordance with Council's bushfire place of last resort plan, and have also, for the Camperdown site, received approval from the Municipal Fire Management Planning Committee and the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee for this site to be proposed to Council for consideration. Councillors, the recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Mr. Bond. Councillors, have the recommendations before you. Councillor Beard, Councillor Illingworth, second. Councillor Beard.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. And this process has gone through all the avenues that it needs to go through. Council first puts up the sites that are potential, I guess, that potentially can get the green light, and then obviously that goes through the CFA, and not only the CFA but VicPol and also other community or public members were also involved in this. I just want to reiterate that the bushfire place of last resort used to be known as neighbourhood safer places, in case people are getting a little bit concerned by all the different acronyms, but it doesn't mean that this takes over from a relief centre or a or another safe area. I was wondering if Mr Bond was going to allude to that or not at all, but this is literally the place of last resort. So ideally we want people to still stay in their defendable homes if that's the case, or in, obviously some people have bunkers in other areas, or, you know, neighbourhood shelters which are defendable, but you know, if this is the absolute last resort, then obviously these sites are highlighted, and it was quite evident after the Southwest fires or the St Paddy's Day fires that we had in 2018, particularly the communities of Cobden, Camperdown, Terang and Noorat all identified that they needed to know, or their communities wanted to know, where such place would be. We obviously have places already identified in other communities, but not in these particular towns. So it's not designed to be that, you know, if people get there, they're going to have emergency services there to protect them, or there'll be toilet and food, or you know, a luxury. It's not. It is a place that's still not going to be ideally the best place you want to be, but it is a place that obviously has been identified as a last resort if needed, and obviously it's been able to be identified. It's maintainable under council's maintenance regime. So there was a few sites that were put up, and obviously the CFA identified this one as the best one here in Camperdown. It's important to notice too, or to note too, that Mr Bond alluded to the fact that the Municipal Fire Management Planning Committee gave it the green light. They did a voting on it. Their members did, and then obviously then that went up to the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee, which I chair, and various people obviously voted on that, and they all agreed with this as the right site under the guidance of CFA. So I just wanted to reiterate that once again, this is literally the place of last resort. During our fires, we noted that we had relief centres set up in various towns, and this is something completely different. So we need to make sure that people don't flock there thinking that they're going to get all this support, because it just may not be the case. So it'll be exciting to see, or not exciting, but I'll be interested to see when the other approvals come through for Terang, Cobden and Noorat, and I think Councillor Durant and Councillor Gustrin will certainly agree with me that those communities, I think, will be a lot more relaxed knowing that they've also been identified. So thank you.
Councillor Reid, Councillor Illingworth.
Happy to pass this. I think this is a terrific idea. I think I do think though that you know, when you're talking about bushfire and risk, the first thing that comes into my mind is Simpson and Timboon. And so I would look forward to having something like this somewhere accessible in the south. The difficulty is, of course, down there is that you're talking about massive fuel loads, you're talking about trees that block roads that fall down, and even if you get towards the beach, it's a 15-metre cliff to get there. It is quite dangerous, and sometimes, as we found during the southwest fires, is that you don't know there's a fire coming. It happened at the start, well, late in the season, and as it was getting dark. So I think this is a step in the right direction for sure, and I'm hoping that we can continue.
Thanks, councillors. Any further comment? I'd just like to reinforce Councillor Beard's comments, and it must be remembered that bushfire places of last resort are not refuges or places of safety, really. There are places that if all other options are exhausted that you may be able to go to. The safest option by far is to have a personal fire plan and to leave early if you have the opportunity. Planning ahead of the fire season is vital. You need to know where you'll go, what you'll take with you, what safety equipment you will have to have with you, and how to assist your vulnerable neighbours and family. It's all in the wording. It's a place of last resort if everything else fails. So I'd like to put the motion. If all those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to item 9.16, quick response grants, and I think Councillor Weird has a conflict.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to identify that I have an indirect conflict of interest because of the applications involving the Cobden Junior Fire Brigade and the Cobden Olympic Basketball Association.
Mr Ray, thank you.
Mr Mayor, thank you. And through you, councillors, for this evening, for your consideration, is the last allocation from the Quick Response Grants program for the 1920 financial year. 10 applications have been received, and those applications total just over $4,800. And Mr Mayor, the recommendation before you this evening is to award those applications.
Thanks, Mr Ray. Councillors, recommendation is before you. Someone move the recommendation. Councillor Brown.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I would like to...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, you
Do we have a second?
going too fast. It's going to change.
Pardon? Change. Oh, right. Continue.
Yeah, I'd like to move an exception to the list that we have. Is that all you need?
Yeah.
Okay. The exception being the Western Plains Working Together group.
Pardon?
The exception being the Western Plains Working Together group project.
I think Councillor Brown's moving a motion that, as recommended, excluding that particular grant application.
Okay.
Right. We have a seconder for that. Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Brown.
Okay, thank you. Excuse my fumbling there. These are all worthy applications, and I just would need some clarification on the one that I've asked to have as an exception. So I'd like to support all the applications for the quick response grants with the exception of the Western Plains Working Together group. This is an interesting project with merit, but I would like to have more information of what is proposed and the costs involved before approving it. The Council have a website with excellent information which is kept up to date regarding e-waste, and also a brochure which I have here, and it seems to me that there may be some doubling up of information. So I'd like to recommend that the group have talked to me as a councillor, or another councillor if they don't want to talk to me, to work out the best way of doing this and fill me in on the information that they want to do. And work out a more cost-effective method of doing it too. They're proposing to do a newsletter sent out separately from our community newsletter, and I believe if it was distributed through our community newsletter there would be a cost saving as well as a wider distribution. So I therefore ask that this application be deferred and recommend that this group discusses this proposal and reapplies later on. Thank you.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Langworth.
Yeah, more than happy. I think that it's appropriate that if council's already doing what it is that they're doing, I think that they should just come and speak to the local council and perhaps come up with something else.
Thank you. So, councillors, we're clear on what we're voting on, with the exception of the Derrinallum proposal. All those in favour? Carried. Have Councillor Beard back. We'll move on to item 9.17, record of Assembly of Councillors. Mr. Mason.
Very simply, Mr. Mayor, just 3 records of assembly to be accepted as required by the Act.
Councillors, recommendations before you. Councillor Restrain, seconder. Councillor Brown. Councillor Restrain.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Any further comment? All those in favour? Carried. Other business. Councillors, any other business? I've just got one item, and it relates to the opening up of business in regions. With the recent return to some clamps down in with COVID virus in the metropolitan area, I'd like to propose that Council writes to the Premier so that he consider a system perhaps of zoning or creating enclaves that allow regions by local government areas or to open up with less restrictive manner if they are COVID free. The current restrictions are very punitive on our businesses. If we are COVID free in the area, I think it would be good to see certain areas opened up within the state. If we can keep business as usual without endangering or taking a step backwards, I think it's something we should be exploring, and I'd like to see the state government come out and consider either zones or enclaves, perhaps. Well, I can move that motion.
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Langworth. Councillors, any further comment?
I would say I think that it is a difficult scenario because our geographical boundaries aren't necessarily the boundaries of the virus, but absolutely 100%. If you can, if you're able to shut down where the virus is, that may well be, the best scenario.
Councillors, any further comment?
Just make a comment. I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, and I think that really, as we say in many cases, it's not one size fits all, and that the restrictions that are being imposed around Brimbank and Darebin, Melbourne inner suburbs, don't really relate to us. But in saying that, we have to be very mindful that while we're really eager to get our tourism, particularly those businesses, hospitality businesses, getting up and running, it's suddenly, if we have particularly during school holidays en masse, a lot of people visiting, which while that's good for the hip pocket, you just don't know what's coming our way and what could the longer term effects be that we end up having to be closed down. And I would like to think that perhaps once school holidays are finished, that there is an easing of restrictions from the state government, but perhaps we could look at, in writing to the Minister and the Premier, I beg your pardon, and I support you in that, that we look at having those sorts of restrictions eased post school holiday period.
Well, I'd be happy to include that school holiday proviso in the motion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Illingworth. Councillors, any further comment? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We now move on to item 11, if there's no other business, to open forum. Does anyone want to contribute to open forum?
Please.
Mr Mulholland.
Before I ask the question I have stood up here for, can I please thank those responsible for setting up this room and allowing the public to come in. I congratulate you and thank you very much, because perhaps I'm the old school, but actually seeing it live is much better than this modern technology. And as a matter of constructive criticism, but not so much criticism, if the audio could be to everyone in the room, because I found it very hard, and I'm sure other members of the public have found it very hard to hear the proceedings tonight. If that can be brought into the next council meetings, because I'm sure that we're going to have many more like this, because whilst we'd like to be rid of this virus, I think it's going to stick around for quite a while. My reason for standing is it would appear that the state government and federal government will be putting out a lot of money to get every economy going. And I challenge everyone in this room and others in the council to go for every grant that's available, because it will be to the benefit of everyone in our community. And I hope that people like David Ray, who I believe is very good at getting grants, I don't care if you do some overtime, but if you put a good effort into getting as many grants as you can, I think it'll be to everyone's benefit. And thank you very much for the opportunity, not only to be able to talk to you, but for this, the way this hall's set up. And can I say, before I sit down, this is perhaps the first time I've been in this hall since it's been done up, and it looks very nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. Thank you. Any other one for forum?
Colin Hayman.
Thanks, Colin.
Just wondered if I could ask a question and then a comment. Just a question. Just wondered if council had any indication how long the barriers around the Lura Hotel will be up.
I'll refer that to Mr Mason.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, I can respond to that in part. So we've received an engineer's report for the hotel which identifies that the outer skin of the brick wall needs repair, so it needs to be taken down on the first level and reconstructed. We've issued a minor works order through our municipal building surveyor, and those works will be undertaken very soon. So hopefully within the next few weeks the safety barriers will be down and the road reopened properly again.
Thanks.
I'd also like to endorse Mr Mulholland. I don't often agree with Les Mulholland, but I did today in terms of the hearing, so thank you for that. Just in terms of the budget, I just want to endorse council's approach in terms of its budget. I know council went to a great effort in a short space of time to come up with something that was acceptable in terms of the current guidelines, in terms of COVID, but also being very responsible in terms of looking at the 4-year, 5-year program in terms of meeting the guidelines set down the Auditor General. So I'd endorse the comments that council made, those that I heard anyway.
Thanks, Mr Hayne. Okay. No further comments? Then we have no confidential items, so I'll close the meeting. Thank you.